call the meeting to order. Roll call. Larry?
Here.
Brian?
Here.
Ashley? Here. Brun? Here. Jane?
Here.
What's up?
Here.
Is Dylan running late? Do we know? Is he coming?
Julie, did you hear anything from Dylan?
Maybe he's just running a little late. All right.
So you forgot me.
Hang on.
I'm so sorry, Jeannie.
You went back and did
It's
Jane.
the computer. It's the computer. We need to shift it. Jeannie.
Here.
All right, notice of meeting.
The meeting was properly noticed.
All right, adoption of agenda. I have a motion.
So moved.
Second. All in favor of adopting the agenda, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, you can stand and join me in the pledge. All right, first up tonight, we have our Spotlight on Learning with the high school.
I don't know if this is.
Might
gonna
have to
pick
make
me-
that.
What's that?
Might have to put that taller.
I'm not gonna go way.
Okay. 'Cause then David's next, just keep that in mind.
All right, well, we are excited to be here and talk a little bit about how we are responding to our recent ACT data. So we are going to start off with a little bit of maybe troubling news, but ultimately we're going to provide you a little bit of the insight into how we have responded to it. Over the past few years, you can see our trend data up on the screen. You'll notice that it is not reversed. That is not the direction that we would like it to go across each of our content areas. We have seen a slight decline, and in large part that was pretty similar to what we were seeing across the state and what we were seeing with other school districts. But last year they took a pretty big hit, about a 1-point hit, and again it was in all departments, and so that was pretty alarming to us. Across the building, across the district, it's something that we were saying we really need to pay close attention to this. In looking at how that compares with the state, and this is going to be a little bit difficult to read, but ultimately that top gray line would be the aspiring districts that we usually compare ourselves to, and you can see that we were sort of trending very similar to the way they were. The red line is us. The gray line below us would be, I think, county districts, and then down at the bottom would be the state average. And so for about 3 years, you see there's sort of consistency, but then we took a little bit of a dip last year while others slightly went up. We're still well above the state average, so it's not to say that we are poor performing, but the data trend was going the wrong direction. Now, we could talk a little bit about some of the outside and inside influences that maybe have contributed to this. As an example, college requirements. Colleges have not been requiring the ACT over the last couple of years, so that's going to impact student motivation to do well on that particular assessment. COVID instruction, we've talked about students struggling during COVID and all of the disruption that our students that would now be seniors have experienced when they were freshmen and sophomores throughout their time when we were in remote learning and those sorts of things. When looking at the state rate that went just slightly up while we went down, one of the things that you could take a look at is varying participation rates between districts. Ours is very high, and so that may be another way in which you could explain some of this data. And then another piece that I just want to highlight is the aspect of emphasis on innovation. The ACT really assesses very traditional aspects of high school education. It's talking about how predictable your scores are going to be at a C or better when you get to college. And those expectations haven't changed much. The ACT hasn't changed much over the last 20 years. Since I was in high school, it's almost the exact same test. And we think about the world around us and how much it's changed and how we've been trying to engage in authentic and relevant learning here at the school, challenging our teachers to think differently about education. The ACT doesn't change and we change our instruction. If that emphasis isn't there, that's something that could also impact those scores. Regardless of what those influences are, our data is our data. And it's something that we take very seriously. As our district motto says, opening the door to each child's future. The ACT does that. It is one of those gateway components of a student's learning experience and something that is a priority. We want to make sure our students are scoring at a high level. That's incredibly important to us. And so we've engaged in a series of action steps this year to try and impact and change that trajectory that you saw up on the screen. One of them is our messaging to students about how important the ACT is. I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Zindler to speak more to that.
Sorry. Hi, everybody. My name is David Zillen, one of the district learning coaches. As Brian mentioned to you, right, it's really important that we be open and honest with all of our families and our students in terms of why the importance of the ACT and what it is. And one message that students have heard loud and clear is that for many of the schools that they're applying to, the ACT is no longer required for admittance. The ACT is long. It's challenging, and when you couple that long and challenging together with the fact that it may not be required for admittance, the motivation to put forth the best effort isn't always 100% there. What's really important, the message that we're trying to get out to families and to students, however, is this. While the ACT is currently no longer required for admission, there are many schools and universities, not all, but many schools and universities that use GPA and the ACT to determine merit aid or tuition discounting. And some schools offer automatic merit scholarships based on simple test scores and students' grades. And this is money that people don't have to apply for. These are not scholarship competitions. This is simply, right, they come in with their grade point average, they come in with their ACT score, and it's a simple chart and a graph, which I'll show you, and that'll lead to discounting of tuition. If you did any Christmas shopping over the holidays, of course, there's a sale on, and then if you buy this, you can receive an additional 40% off. That, in essence, is what some schools are doing as far as tuition discounting is concerned. And this is just an example of a particular school. This happens to be Central Michigan University. And on the chart up at the top, very small numbers, but that's simply the GPA. And that GPA is recalculated by the school because every high school is coming in with different GPAs in terms of some have weighted grades, et cetera. So Central Michigan University will recalculate that based upon their school. Then on the left-hand column, you see the ACT or the corresponding SAT score, and you can see the different colors that appear on the chart. So basically what it amounts to at Central Michigan University as an example, what will happen is a kid will apply and based upon their GPA and based upon their ACT score, where the chart meets, if you will, it leads to a particular color, and that color will lead to a certain amount of tuition discounting that families and students are allowed when they get into Central Michigan University in this instance. And the important message we're trying to pass on to students and to families is simply this. In this particular example, this student has a 3.7 GPA. He or she earned a 23 on their ACT, and therefore they'll receive $4,400 in aid each year. If that same student were to score 1 point higher on his or her ACT, based upon where they appear on this chart, they could potentially earn $5,700 in discount, and over a 4-year period, that's about $5,000 in savings just by going up a single point on your ACT. This is not universal. This is not happening everywhere, but this is happening at more and more schools. And the second example, we're not talking about elite ACT scores as well. So in this instance here is a student with a 3.3 GPA, and he or she earned an 18 on his or her ACT, which is below state average. Simply by going up to a 20, 2 points higher, this student once again will receive an additional $5,000 over 4 years of college in terms of savings, just by performing a little bit better on their ACT score. So the message is simply this: increasing your ACT score by a single test point can provide students and families access to thousands of additional dollars in financial aid to pay for school. This is money that does not need to be paid back. These are not loans. This is money that they're discounted in terms of their tuition. So the bottom line is this: what we're trying to communicate to students is, while the ACT may not be required to get into your school of choice, your strongest ACT score can greatly reduce your out-of-pocket expenses moving forward. So really, we're trying to speak to the future self of these kids, have some foresight in terms of, as a 16 or 17-year-old, they're not necessarily thinking in terms of when they're graduating from college as a 22, 23-year-old, and the amount of debt that they may incur. So that's part of the messaging that we're looking to do. To look at this specifically, if a student earned $15 an hour for a part-time job or a full-time job in take-home pay, they would need to work over 333 hours in order to make up that $5,000 that they would save potentially by raising their ACT score by a single point. right? So this is part of the messaging that we're trying to pass on to our kids in terms of, and again, making no excuses in terms of our scores whatsoever, but we just want to make sure that the kids put their best foot forward, put forth their best effort, and know that while it may not be required for them to get in, right, when they get out of school, they can get out with incurring far less debt along the way.
All right, so messaging for students is one of the action steps that we have implemented at Pewaukee High School. And every junior student actually heard that on the day when Tom Farley came to visit us. We took advantage of a little bit of extra time that we had during the hour that they were in there to provide some this message as well as some additional ones. But more importantly, we've been working on some actions within the classroom. We've been engaged in some learning sprints, which we're going to talk briefly about. We have incorporated a tool that we've already had access to and already paid for, and we ultimately just really weren't fully utilizing it, which is called Methodize, which is an ACT test prep tool. Vocabulary instruction has been a big part of Pewaukee High School and has been a priority this year. We have our ACT prep course, and we also have ACT intervention and prep sessions. So we're going to run through some examples of these. One of the things from the learning sprints that Jenny Clemmy indicated here, just a little quote from her from today actually in a reflection activity we did. Kids are much more aware of the ACT simply, its components and ramifications. It has been a much more intentional process with kids seeing their progress and being aware of it. This is just an example of how these learning sprints have impacted her particular classroom. The learning sprints we actually stole from another part of the school district. This has been going really well at the younger grades where teachers are getting together and having targeted intervention over a very short amount of time. You've probably heard about this already, but it's focused on a specific group of students in a single range of ACT results from the practice ACT. So we're trying to target specific kids and then looking at a specific skill that would actually move them up to that next range and those 1 or 2 points that would help them out across their ACT scores. Kelly Weltzine actually had this to say earlier today. In U.S. history, we have focused on reading skills by analyzing short reading passages related to the history content we are studying, but through the lens of ACT prep questions. And that's really what we want to try to do is infuse back into, while we're doing authentic and relevant learning experiences, we want to infuse back into them those ACT specific skills and be transparent and overt about it so that the kids can pick up these are the things that we're working on and see the importance in that learning. I'll turn it over to Mr. Hillman, who joined us for an example about English.
Thank you. So yes, with ACT English specifically, within our bell work activities, just gave you the handout of what's one of them would look like in the English 11 classroom. We've been looking specifically at ACT English with raising those points, whether it be just 1 or 2 from that area, and as was already pointed out by Mr. Zindler, it can have a really nice effect in the long run. So planning for those things, but just exposing them to those different aspects of the types of questions that they're going to be asked. I like that this is more of on a consistent basis. So every class period that we have, we're starting with these types of activities. So not only do they see them in ACT format, but then also we do work with them with like the example that you have in front of you. So we broke it down with a pretest to start off with our learning sprints to find out what areas we're in greatest of need, specifically with the ACT English section. So what came out of that, our data that came out of that for the classrooms were verb tense, commas, colons, semicolons, dashes, fragments, run-ons, subject-verb agreement. Not surprising, like I could have probably named off all of those to begin with anyway, but we wanted to be sure that we were definitely hitting the students that were in the lower areas that we were talking about, raising those scores 1 or 2 points, so we were more a concentrated effort on, all right, if you get 2 more of verb tense questions correct, you're going to go up 1 more point in the English portion. So just that consistent effort, I think, has been, it will pay off in the end, certainly. The other aspect that we've been utilizing is, or the final aspect, I guess, utilizing in with our first learning sprint was using the methodized lessons on a more consistent basis. So the methodized lessons that Mr. Stiff will talk about in a moment, but just utilizing those instead of for our bell work and gathering the data that we have with that test prep as well.
So just to take you into our methodized tool, a little bit of data that we have access to. You'll notice here, answered questions to date is 180,688 questions within the high school. So there's a lot of practice being done utilizing this particular tool. The system itself suggests that we try to hit 50,000 questions, so we've certainly exceeded that. Digging in a little bit into some of the details about what we can see into the concept score report. So what this will show you here is for English, for instance, our average has been about 61% correct answers. The norm across methodized is really 49%, so we're well above the norm on that front, with 101 of the questions being asked within the English program. So what Mr. Hillman was talking about is an example of how it's being utilized and being able to measure how we're doing. We can dig even deeper into that. There we go, where we can look at apostrophes, colons, commas, and we can see where, you know, our green dot is above essentially the norm, and we can also go down and see where maybe it is not above the norm. I think that only happened in math, possibly. So you can go to any one of our sections, and we can take a look at how we are doing across specific ideas and concepts, and then that allows for our learning sprints to be focused and targeted around that area and say, hey, we noticed that a lot of kids across the board are struggling in this particular area, and then they can use that information to try and define what their next learning sprint is going to be, so we can be targeted where we need to be targeted and just reinforce where we have to reinforce. And so this is some of the data that we get back. Methodized, when you look at it, really looks and feels like the ACT. In fact, students can actually go in and take a full-length ACT if they would like to, if they have the 4 hours on a Saturday and they'd like to dig into it. But all kids have access to this, and so this is something that grades 9, 10, and 11 are all doing. I'm sure some seniors who might be stuck in certain classes have been asked to do it as well. But ultimately, we aren't just investing in this year's 11th grade students, we're investing in 9th and 10th grade students as well. And again, we already had this, so like this wasn't even something we had to go out and get. We just weren't simply utilizing it. We only utilized it in our ACT prep course, which is an individualized course that students can just work their way through that program. All right. So one of the other things that we've provided building-wide is our vocabulary program, so I'm going to turn it back over to Mr. Zindler.
One of the really important messages we want to make sure we pass on to you is while we're certainly tending to the ACT test prep, we're not a test prep school. We need to make sure that we have balance with it in terms of having the kids as best we can prepared, as best as they can be prepared for the ACT, but we're still emphasizing the authentic and relevant. And the school-wide vocabulary program might be a classic example of how you can do both. So what it is, each one of our district buildings has a literacy goal, and at the high school level, it's 65% of our students will meet their pre-ACT, ACT goal in English and reading as measured by the tests that we have coming up this spring, the pre-ACT and next week's state ACT. It was 2 weeks ago at the most recent school board meeting that Mr. Pizzo and Mrs. Spadoni presented to you, and we talked about the Asa Clark Middle School goal of by June of 2023, 73% of 6th, 7th, and 8th grade students will meet expectations in ELA as outlined by their dashboard, and in each of the different grade levels, they're already exceeding that at the midway checkpoint. One way we're trying to meet these goals is through vocabulary. And what we know through literacy research is that the 2 quickest ways that you can help improve and impact reading scores and improve comprehension is to expand students' background knowledge and to grow their vocabulary. So we have designed we call it a schools-wide vocabulary program because it exists in the high school and it exists in the middle school as well. The idea is simple, and what we're trying to do is we want to create success for our students. So in order to do that and fulfill our PSD mission, we want to emulate successful people. And there are research studies that have been done, and the research studies that have been done, they basically studied as they defined successful people. And they tried to see what commonalities existed amongst these successful people. And what they concluded was fascinating, and what they concluded was simply this. There is no similarity of successful people in terms of gender, in terms of age, in terms of ethnicity, or anything of the sort, the one commonality that all successful people had is they had unusually large vocabularies. So with that in mind, we emphasize vocabulary acquisition to our students. And what that basically is our vocabulary program addresses Tier 2 vocabulary. And Tier 2 vocabulary simply crosses different disciplines. So we go from English to social studies to science to math to culinary. It's words that can be seen and used authentically in each of the different subject areas. We get these words from a list called the High Incidence Academic Word List. It's a list that's linked right there. It's 570 words of the most common words that are used, once again, that cross disciplines. We have 4 of those words, and then 1 challenge word that comes from an ACT or SAT list. This image right here kind of illustrates what we mean by Tier 2. So Tier 1 vocabulary, that's your foundational vocabulary that kids are learning across campus in terms of PLE and Horizon. Basic words when they're learning to read, like table, teacher, and read. Our vocabulary program addresses Tier 2 vocabulary. Tier 2 vocabulary are words that are going to cross disciplines. Words like analysis, amend, differentiate. Tier 3 vocabularies are ones that are specific to content areas. So terms like gerrymandering, onomatopoeia, photosynthesis, denominator. We're still going to teach those vocabulary words, but those are taught by the subject matter teachers. All teachers, however, can be a part of the Tier 2 vocabulary instruction. So here's what it is. In every single one of our middle school and high school classrooms, every single week, you'll see a series of 5 vocabulary words that are posted in those classrooms. And then down below, you see it in orange, past week words that are highlighted in there in terms of what we've done in the past. And then there exists in every classroom, a new set of 5 words are featured each week, and words are introduced through a book talk during Monday morning announcements. For example, it'll be Tuesday this week because we didn't have school today because of professional development today. But I'll be getting on the announcements in both buildings. There's a high school book and there's a middle school book. I read a book talk introducing a book to the students, and in that book talk, I'll muscle in each of the different vocabulary words so the kids can hear it. And then, this is an example of collective teacher efficacy, which we know through educational research is the most impactful thing in terms of impacting student learning. And what collective teacher efficacy talks about is everybody, in essence, rowing the boat all together. So throughout the week, all of our teachers are trusted to deliberately and overtly embed the words into their instruction. So those same words that you see in everybody's classrooms, teachers are asked to use them. Throughout the week, then, teachers are then asked to create opportunities for students to use the words in their writing and their speaking. Because what vocabulary research indicates is, in order for a word to become a part of a vocabulary, we need to have interactions with it from 10 to 17 times. Think of broccoli in terms of when your young ones were, or when your children were young, and you had to feed them broccoli 7, 8 times before they actually got to like it. Same concept here in terms of how vocabulary becomes a part of our vocabulary. It's not about seeing it once, putting it on a list, memorizing it for a quiz or a test, passing it on Friday and forgetting what that word meant by Saturday morning. Okay? So then how this works is, these are the, okay.
You asked me, okay. All right, so again, today we did a little bit of a reflection activity. Here are some examples across the building, and I tried to find like non-English related examples. And so in Spanish, they have to conjugate a verb for belt work at the beginning of each class, and so they use the verbs from the vocab list in Spanish to be able to conjugate those specifically. In drama, they actually start by crafting a sentence, and they have to perform that sentence in a particular manner. So like, are you heartbroken about this? Are you evil? Are you a judge? Whatever it may be. But ultimately, they use it in all these different ways, but they tie it into the whole idea of a dramatic performance. And then in economics, they have a particular blog that they write in, and so they try to select specific words out of the vocab words to be able to be utilized in the economic blog. So these are just some of the examples of how it just gets woven into the practices that already take place. And again, this goes back to the other ideas that we provided. This is not intended to replace authentic and relevant learning experiences. It's intended to enhance them and make it more transparent how we're weaving in ACT learning experiences. So we're not going backwards. We're just trying to enhance and be more transparent about what it is that we're doing. Sorry to throw you that curveball.
No worries. So basically this math problem here. So during a typical 5-day school week, PHS students will attend 20 different classes. So 4 classes a day, 5 days a week. And therefore, every one of our students have 20 opportunities to hear, speak, and write each of the featured vocabulary words, which is in excess of the 10 to 17 that research says that we need. Because what our goal ultimately is we're looking to advance every student up the stages of learning a word continuum for each of the featured words, and that's this chart right here. So there's some kids, for example, one of the words in our most recent week was capricious. There's some students that are familiar with that word. There's some students that have never heard that word before. So number 1, for example, on that particular chart. By the end of the week, not every student in the high school is going to be able to use capricious in their reading and their writing, right? But over the course of the week, they're going to grow from a 1 perhaps to a 2 or a 3 or something of that nature. So everyone's going to start someplace different, and our goal then is to grow them on this particular continuum.
All right, and so finally, these are the things that we've shared with you are really things that are happening across the building. We also wanted to identify students that, based upon practice ACT data, were not actually on track to meet their benchmarks. And so we wanted to provide them specific test prep interventions. We use resource as a time to do that, so we're not pulling away from classes, but ultimately having those kids come in early. And over the course of February and March, there were, I believe, 3 sessions in science, 3 sessions in English, in reading, and so on. English prep was woven into English 11, as Mr. Hillman indicated, and there were also optional sort of a test tricks and tips sessions that were available to all students that will be taking place later this week, in fact. So that is some of the intervention work that we've done to also enhance and get us prepared for the big day, which is next week, March 7th. So the unfortunate reality is we won't know the results of how all this work came about until about, July or somewhere in that neck of the woods. So you will hopefully hear a big yip in the middle of the summer, and it maybe is coming from me and from the high school. So, but ultimately we're excited to see how the students do. We really appreciate all the efforts of our instructional leaders and teachers within the building because this has been a monumental task. Danielle and Robin have been tremendous in the process of helping bring learning sprints into the high school and across all of our core content areas. So we're excited for what our possibilities are, and we're looking to see that trend turn around and go the other direction. So be happy to entertain any questions that you have.
Anyone have any questions? Okay. Are all the high school kids required to take the ACT?
They are. March 7th is when there's a statewide ACT done with all students in all high schools. The reality is a student can choose not to take that ACT if they would like. Students can take additional ACT opportunities that take place on Saturdays and things along those lines to improve their scores. But as far as how data is reported to the state, our data is only hinged upon this particular day. So it's free, doesn't cost anything. If a student wants to take it another time, they have to pay for it. So it's a wise day for them to go ahead and take this exam.
In 2015, the state changed to make it the state test.
Okay.
Pretty sure you get the results from the ACT. Is the printout similar to the breakdown that you have methodized so that you can compare like the final results to maybe where you were at right now in methodized?
So there's a little bit of a challenge in the sense of the timing, because again, we don't get them for quite some time. Methodized, as soon as they take the test, we then know the results. There are some issues with methodized in the sense that students can go in and retake problems and retake tests, so there are ways in which you can cheat around it, but it's ultimately not used for a grade, so there's no value for the students to cheat. But ultimately, I wouldn't fully rely on those numbers to say this is how we're going to do. So there's a couple of different challenges that come with that, and I've always found it sort of, the ACT doesn't really provide you really pared down feedback that way. It's a little more individualized for individual students and sort of more big picture for here's how you did in math, here's how you did in English, and that from a school perspective. I remember back when I was in Madison, we used to be able to do like item analysis and get a little bit more drilled down data, but that's not been something that's been a part of our analysis of late. Yeah.
I have probably a couple of questions. Sorry, Stacy. One of the things you had up there, the comparable or the districts, the high-performing districts that are out
Yeah.
there. So in terms of their performance, obviously they kept kind of going up, we did go up. The strategies that you guys have presented with, or presented us with tonight, are those school districts doing something different, or are they doing the same things that you've implemented now?
I mean, it's hard to say. Every school district approaches it differently. So, I mean, Methodize is something that you will hear other districts talk about. It's one that people will ask, like, who's using it, who's not, and stuff. But every district approaches, you know, things differently, and so it's really kind of hard to say.
Good, you know, I mean, as far as trying to provide interventions, analyzing data as a process and then trying to do targeted work to improve that data is a pretty general strategy and a kind of a proven strategy if you want to improve ACT scores. So, you know, every school district is going to try to interweave that in their own way.
The other thing you guys talked about was relative to the financial, which is okay, fine, but for some kids that may or may not be the incentive. But you also talked about the successful people in the models relative to the vocabulary. And I'm assuming that that's based on pretty sound research that's out there in terms of going forward with it. But how does that incentivize students? I mean, are they willing to kind of say, yes, indeed, I want to expand my vocabulary because I want to be successful? Or is it like, well, okay, I'm fine with the vocabulary I have, or?
Well, the motivations of teenagers is a sort of wide scope. And so certainly we, you know, I mean, what we are about is producing an educated citizenry. I mean, in order for us to be successful as a society, we have to have educated members of that society. There's a lot of factors that go into a student's decision about whether they want to take school seriously or not. It has a lot to do with the teachers that are in front of them. It has a lot to do with what messaging they're hearing from home. It has a lot to do with what messaging they're hearing from their peer groups. There's a lot of things that motivate kids. We would like to say, like, hey, the smarter you are, the more successful you are. Well, actually, we do say that. And we hope that students come along. And so sometimes we use long-term goals like being successful in life. Sometimes we talk about being successful in college and saving money to get to college. Not every student is headed to college, and so that's not even compelling to them. So, you know, we use a lot of different ways to try and convince students that if you want to be the most powerful individual, get an education and utilize it. So, I don't know. Musab, do you want to add to any of this? I mean, you're the voice of reason here.
I mean, with regards to the vocabulary program, I think it's so well integrated with what I do in an average school day that I almost have no choice. I'm going to listen to it on the announcements. I'm going to do it in my Spanish class or see it on the bell work or the agenda in my science class. So I think it's the vocabulary words and the system is there, and I definitely notice it. I see it. There's no choice for me to do it or not. It's more of like a choice of whether I take it seriously or not, and I think that's just a choice that students have to make. It's there for them, and if you use it, it's going to be beneficial, but it's up to the student.
So, and this is, okay, so I'm kind of going down a path on this one. So a few years ago, I heard a person by the name of Dana Suskin. She's a surgeon in Chicago, and she's written a book called 30 Million Words, and it's targeted for ages 0 to 3 in terms of kids and their brain development. And another person I heard talk about that same topic literally had the CT scans and images of the brains for kids that were exposed to reading and all sorts of good things. Their brains were bigger than other kids. So maybe one of the things we have to show kids is it's like, if you really want to be smart, here's what you need to do to expand your brain size, if you will. So I don't know if I could find those images from he was a professor at UW-Madison in terms of a physician there in terms of doing that stuff. But you're powerful. I mean, that's the whole thing. The words and vocabulary that you learn really become how you present yourself, how you can describe things or do things in certain professions that are out there. I mean, I don't know, from attorneys or accountants or all of the folks that do work here. I mean, if it weren't for the vocabulary that we have to learn and understand, and now sometimes in education, there's a lot of jargon that goes along with it, but it's all part of the makeup of what makes you a successful professional. So expanding that vocabulary really opens, I think, a lot more doors for kids, and maybe that's the way we have to somehow come up with this and say, kids, if you really want to be successful in the world and have jobs that do certain things, you can't have a narrow vocabulary. You have to have a vocabulary based on your pyramid that you had, and some of them it's gonna be very, very specific to the type of work that you're gonna do. If you're an engineer, you speak and talk like Brian Cammers does, okay? And you enjoy those things. If you wanna be an accountant, or like Stacy, you speak accounting terms in terms of those language that's out there, so.
I'm thinking that maybe Larry should come and do the announcements tomorrow morning.
That's one of the research studies that we've used as an anchor for the 4K program, right?
Right,
And that building the background knowledge and going through that pathway is that 30 million word gap research that's out there for students who are exposed to that in their early childhood developmental years compared to those that don't have that level of exposure.
So probably my point is, it's like, keep up the good work, and hopefully we can figure out ways to sort of get people or students to understand that vocabulary is really how you communicate with the world in terms of out there.
Yeah, I mean, we want to see good results, and we want to see them because our kids need the good results. They do open the doors for them and their future. Sure, it's nice to have a high-performing school, and that's something that motivates us tremendously. But the reality is, our kids need to be able to do well on this in order to be able to access those programs to be successful.
And it's probably has to be something beyond the BFF or whatever it is.
LOL.
Yes.
LOL, yeah. I mean, it's part of vocabulary, but, not necessarily used every day. so.
I appreciate the response that the curriculum team, the coaches, and the admin took to the scores going down. I mean, it sounds like a really good plan. It sounds like the students are participating, hopefully, happily, with some motivation, like you said. So thank you very much.
You bet.
Does anybody else have anything?
Good work, thank you.
Great response.
Thank you.
That was a
Yep,
great
good job.
presentation.
Excellent, thank you.
Thanks for being here tonight, appreciate it.
Don't trip, don't trip.
The low hurdles. I just wanted to note that you must not have had broccoli 10 to 17 times, because Danielle's known for not liking her vegetables.
I don't think I've ever had broccoli,
Yeah.
period.
So we gotta get her to eat broccoli like 17 times.
I have a general rule in life, do not eat anything green.
Yeah.
I want to know who's successful with 10 to 17, because I'm way above that.
You still haven't, it hasn't
Yeah.
taken,
Yeah, I
didn't
think
take?
the numbers
Okay.
are- Yeah, but no, much larger.
I don't recommend my diet.
All right, moving on to salutes recognitions. Do we have anything? Anyone? No?
I have one. I'd like to salute Kirk Stimpert.
Oh,
Oh, ping pong.
ping
So
pong.
you didn't know, we were the ping pong state champions recently, and gosh, Kirk started our table tennis club. I don't even know. Do you have any idea how long ago, Danielle? It's been
No,
quite a while.
Before I was an admin, so it's been
Yeah,
a
I
long
think I
time,
was AP
20
at the
years
high
probably.
school, maybe when he started having a table tennis club at the high school. And so I thought that was pretty cool to see Mr. Stimpert and those students who were part of the table tennis club to get those kinds of accolades. So that's pretty neat.
That's very exciting. I love that we have a table tennis club.
Yeah.
You know, a district our size, and
Yeah.
we can offer that variety of things. It's great. All right.
Can I mention, Mike Katie? I brought this up in policy committee, but last Saturday, I attended the wrestling invitational here. And then we got to the point where we took a break before the finals, and they had to kind of redo the wrestling mats and the floor. And I looked down, and there's Mike Katie, who is pulling up tape and rolling up mats. And in that moment, I said to myself, I wonder how many superintendents would actually be sitting out there doing that. So I just wanted to publicly say thank you for all you do. And it's not just because you're crazy about wrestling, it's because you care, so.
Thanks, Brian. Appreciate it.
He is crazy about
Yeah, but he is.
Yes, yes.
All right. Any comments from citizens, Julie? Any cards? All right. Moving on to the consent agenda. We had the minutes from the previous meetings, the regular meeting and the business affairs meeting on February 13th. We had our correspondence that was included in our packet, and we had a couple gifts, $1,000 from Komatsu Joy Global for robotics and $1,000 from GE Healthcare to the First Lego League at Horizon. Do I have a motion to accept the consent agenda?
So moved. Second.
All in favor of accepting the consent agenda, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right. Moving on to the Waukesha County Special Education Cooperative Contract.
And we have Tony here to talk about that. You have his materials in your packet. Welcome, Mr. Stranky.
Good evening, everybody. It's good to be here. So annually for the last, this will be year 33, that we've been part of the Waukesha County Special Education Cooperative. Elmbrook runs it. Many area districts participate. We have a contract for services in deaf and hard of hearing and vision itinerant. Those are two very challenging areas to fill. There's a statewide shortage. This consortium has done an exceptional job. In addition to that, our numbers have always been quite low. We go up by one student, and that would be vision itinerant. And those services deal with orientation and mobility and supporting the student in navigating the school setting. So my recommendation moving forward for the 23-24 school year is to approve this service so we could have the continued services that we've had for the last 33 years.
Does anybody have any questions or comments?
I just have a quick question. Can you just give me an example of how the services work? Because I get itinerant. Does that mean that someone comes to our school, the student goes to another school, or they do it in-home service?
That's a really good question. So as of right now, this year, we have both professionals coming to this school. The itinerant services are here. Lynn Oregon is here 2 half-days a week, servicing the students, connecting with the students, talking to the classroom teachers. We have a sign language interpreter that she works very closely with over at the middle school. She even assists me in evaluation processes because she knows the sign language. It's been a really positive experience, and for the orientation and mobility, depending upon the needs of the kid, they'll come in at the onset of the year, make sure that the classroom is set up, and support the students dependent on the IEP, whether it's weekly, bi-weekly, or monthly. Oftentimes the services that we are contracting for the students in question are weekly, and sometimes they're as many as twice a week where they're collaborating with teachers. We have some students that have hearing under the hearing itinerant where they have FM systems and the teacher has a microphone, and once the setup is done, they might consult quarterly. So it just depends on the severity of the case, whether or not the student's completely blind or if the student has a very challenging hearing impairment. We have a lot of unique circumstances where when the kids are really little, they don't quite have the implants, the cochlear implants, but once they get the cochlear implants and they're adjusted, they need a little bit less service because they learn to adapt to the school environment.
And approximately, what's the annual cost? I'm sorry, I should ask.
So that's going to vary.
Yeah.
We share the costs based on the number of students and the number of districts participating. So costs can be increased or decreased because they take the total number of students being serviced by the professionals and they divvy it up based on a per pupil allocation and the service minutes. So costs are driven by IEPs. So itinerants usually are running in this area anywhere from $80 to $120 an hour. So, but it's dependent on the needs of the student, and it's really hard to say. Next year, we're going to have a new student entering at Lowell. That's going to be a tuition-based student, so that cost is going to look a little bit differently because they're early childhood and their programming is just getting assessed and built. And the students that are smaller and just entering school take a lot more service delivery than students that have been with us for a while and are picking up on the accommodation plans and are advocating for themselves.
I appreciate these collaborative programs and being able to offer our our citizens and community members this service. So
Sure.
thank you.
And we could get you the costing for this year, but we won't know that because they process it. We usually get the bill in June based on the services that are being rendered by all of the area partnering districts.
Doesn't John have that memorized?
Anyone else? Okay, do I have a motion?
I'll move to approve the Waukesha County Special Education Cooperative Contract for the 2023-2024 school year as presented.
Second.
All in favor of approving the motion as said, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you, Anthony.
Thanks for coming tonight.
All right, moving on to the transfer, I have to read that whole thing. Transfer of funds, the establishment of an escrow account with respect to and the defeasance of certain of the general obligation refunding bonds, Series 2019.
So annually, part of the strategy of the district in managing the outstanding debt service is to evaluate what are the balances that we have available in the debt service fund and take advantage of opportunities that we have to save money on the long-term interest cost for the district. If you recall, last January, we transferred the proceeds that were remaining from the construction project over to the debt service fund. They're restricted. They were for the purpose of that project. When the project was closed, we sent the balance over to Fund 39, our debt service fund. That and additional levies that we've been able to accrue in that account is what would be used to fund this defeasance of about $2 million, $1,998,000. The money being put into escrow will be used to pay principal and a portion of the interest for the debt that's due in 2038, the end of our debt schedule. So the net result of this transaction is saving about $998,000 in interest cost through the maturity of when that debt is outstanding for. The other thing to note, in our debt schedule, this year is a year where we would have had zero for our debt service payments. We still had the levy, which would be applied to our fall payments. We will amend that part of the budget when we do our regular budget process, our amendment process in May. So we'll take care of the amendment to reflect that change in the budget for this year to do this transaction.
Any questions?
Yeah, John, thanks. I mean, saving that much money is great. Does this also shift the shelf, the debt shelf, to earlier?
So when we plan on the debt service for the district, we always try to look in the windows that match the long-range financial planning, the long-range facility planning for the district. So in advance, in 2016, when we began looking at the debt service plan for what would be outstanding for the referendum that was held in November of 2018, we anticipated 2025, 2026 would be the next point where phase 2 of that long-range facility master plan may kick in. So it all depended on what the pace of growth in the community was, where the students were coming, what was that residential turnover. But we anticipated that 8 years out, you know, we talk about 10-year planning windows. We thought that 8 years might be closer to that because of the number of developments that were going on in place. So that dip in the debt service occurs between 2025 and 2029, which is the call date on the original debt that was issued. The maturities of all the debt go out to 2038. So it offers us that opportunity in there. If you needed to make an additional investment, you could do it with minimizing any tax impact.
So you mean you'd call the debt at that time?
You could call it in 2029.
Yeah, okay. All right, thank you.
And it really depends on where the interest rates are at the time. The debt that's outstanding from 2029 through 2038 is, I believe, is at 4%.
Anyone else? I have a motion?
I'll move to, wait, what?
You see it?
Resolution authorizing the transfer of funds, the establishment of an escrow account with respect to the defeasance of certain of the general obligation refunding bonds, Series 2019 Alpha, dated March 20, 2019.
Second.
All in favor of the proposed motion, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, thank you.
That was a mouthful.
I just want to comment and thank John for the constant work that's being done, the expert management of the finances that he provides and his work with our partners, whether it's Baird or others, to really put the district in the most advantageous. And again, projecting out, for the long term, half of our strategic plan is focused on sustainability. So this is a great example of a fiscal practice that's providing great sustainability, saving about $1 million long-term for the district with these kinds of approaches. So I just want to acknowledge that.
And thank you for the write-up. That was really good. Easy to understand. Okay, moving on to the shared services agreement for the Woodland Conference Athletic Conference.
Yeah, this is an annual piece that we need to take action on as members of the Woodland Conference for Athletics. The shared services agreement within the conference, the fiscal agent is the Greendale School District. Document here.
Are we gonna be in the Woodland Conference?
Well, we have two different things. March 7th is about the football conference.
Okay,
So football's in a different conference. Football's in the Parkland
okay.
currently. And of course, that proposal that we're speaking to the Board of Control about on March 7th is about a recommendation of us moving to the Classic 8. But that would be only for football, so not for the others. So I'd take any questions that you have, but what I'd be looking for is a motion and approval for payment in the amount of $4,040 for our Woodland Conference dues.
So moved.
Second.
All right, all in favor of approving the, to pay our portion of the Woodland Conference dues in the amount of $4,040, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes, thank you. All right, moving on to personnel issues.
We have no resignations, but we do have a retirement at this time. Monica Robin, sixth grade teacher from Asa Clark. Her letter is attached, which I'm pulling up right now. 21 years, I believe she indicates here with the Pewaukee School District. So I would take any questions you have. Otherwise, I'd seek your approval of the retirement of Monica Robin with thanks for her long service to the district.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor of approving the retirement of Monica Robin, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, thank you.
And no employments, no leave requests.
Okay. Moving on to board goals and operations, upcoming activities. Monday, March 6th, next week already, can't believe it's March. We have a learning session on our board goal number 3. It's going to be in the district office conference room. March 7th, the next day, we have the reality store. Bren, Jeannie, and I are able to help. Were you able to get one more? Anyone?
I'll get back to you.
Okay.
I'll try.
Thank you, Jane. Okay, and then we have our next board meeting on the 13th, and it'll start with the business affairs at 6 o'clock. And then some of us are heading down to Florida for the NSBA conference. What is our presentation at that one?
Monday morning.
What is it, though?
Oh, the post-secondary.
Post-secondary one? Okay. All right. All right, and then,
And I can just let you know, I will be there for the entire conference
I
now.
saw that.
So,
Good, yeah. And then Monday, April 10th, we have our April meeting, and then we start our strategic planning the following Monday with the Long Range Community Forum. All right, are there any questions? Oh, did you get responses on the honors banquet Wednesday, April 26th? Okay. All right, thank you, everyone that can attend that.
some of the feedback that I had, just as a note, was for board members not to be sitting at a head table. Was that kind of that was some of the feedback I had, that it was preferred to just be sitting at a regular table.
I like it.
Or maybe even paired up and dispersed within within the banquet, or?
It might work. I mean, it's not assigned seating, so the parents all
Yeah, tend to grab tables.
grab tables.
But there can be reserved tables.
Or
Yeah.
sitting with teachers and staff.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, that could be.
That-
Okay.
I mean, that, I guess that was more of that.
That you're thinking, okay, that probably makes more sense, yeah.
And I won't be sitting at the, I will be sitting with my family because I'll have an attendee this year,
Yay.
so. but-
All right. Legislative advocacy discussion.
There's a, I don't know, John or Mike can want to jump in. I mean, there's like a lot of activity going on to kind of prepare for the upcoming kind of budget discussions going on. SWSA has put out a document which kind of describes some of the key things that are relevant for SWSA. We also are taking the show on the road, so to speak. We will be hopefully meeting with chambers of commerce on the North Shore and a south kind of area in terms of being able to connect with the business community out there in terms of doing those things. Try to make sure that there's a really, really good understanding of some of the things that the school districts are facing. And I think, and I don't remember the exact date because I know it got moved a little bit, but we're also presenting to the Waukesha County Business Alliance Group, which is another group that we've met with them in the past. But Suzanne Kelly and the members of that potential education committee within the Waukesha County Business Alliance. And they have some very specific policy priorities related to things. And I think to some extent it fits with what SWSA does, but more importantly, it fits the kinds of things that are occurring in the local school districts within Waukesha County. Transferring high school or higher education credits, flexible programs for education, staffing shortages to do those things, but just a lot of good things in terms of the college career readiness kinds of things that are out there. So that one we align with pretty well in terms of, I think, our mission of our school districts and also SWSA. Probably and Anthony's still here too. Mental health funding is kind of big priority, and also, I'm not gonna use the right term for it, but the certain amount of revenue per, you guys know the term for it, I'm blanking on the term for it.
Well, the other ones that are, first of all, there's the general aid
Yes,
piece, which is related heavily to the fiscal cliff issue. And then, of course, special education reimbursement is our big items that there's advocacy for with the upcoming budget, and it's all, tied in with the surplus and those kinds of things. And so we know, Larry, you shared today as well, and through SWSA, there's some districts that are doing board resolutions, identifying certain amounts that they're advocating for in relation to those items. But they typically involve mental health funding, special ed reimbursement, and general aid.
Do we have a feel for the special ed? Like, is it being well-received, like it's?
It's
positive?
clearly a priority with all groups that are advocating for education funding. The proposal from the governor is for 60% to go. Currently, we're at 30, from 30 to 60% in year one and up to 90% funding in year two, which would be very substantial a benefit to districts. So it's interesting. It'll be interesting to see where that actually falls, because there's going to be, I'm sure, negotiation around all that. John, I don't know if you have anything to add.
Yeah, no, historically, that reimbursement of those costs for special education were in the 50% range a long time ago. And then it was a some certain allocation. So as a some certain, it's a fixed dollar amount. So as the cost increase faster than what the rate is, you prorate. And it was prorated all the way down into the 23-24% range. So the last biennial cycle, there was an acknowledgement of that and increasing the funding level to get it up, that some certain amount up. Ideally, we'd want that to be a some sufficient amount to reimburse to the percentage that's targeted in the law. But that creates uncertainty on the state funding side. So, but ideally, that's the direction you would want it to go.
There's just another, research kind of thing on it. But the Metropolitan Milwaukee Association of Commerce, so one of their items is raise the reimbursement for special education cost. And their point is, of all states with a reimbursement system for special education cost, Wisconsin rate of 28.2% is the country's lowest. Their recommendation, MMAC supports raising reimbursement for special education costs to 50%, as noted by the 2019 Blue Ribbon Commission on School Funding and highlighted by research from the Wisconsin Policy Forum. And Wisconsin continues to trail the nation in funding support for students with disabilities. So, I mean, there's a couple of groups that are really trying to, I think, advocate for that special education funding out there. So.
All right, any other questions or comments? Okay, moving on to our parent themes for town hall meetings. So we received a cover memo with the data from the last parent survey that Candace summarized for us. Have a conversation about any topics that we jumped out at us that we might want to hold a meeting about. Any thoughts?
I mean, I saw the fine arts comments, and I've been approached by individuals with the fine arts that I referred on. I don't know if that's something that we want to hear more about. I don't know. I guess one thing is if we have this town hall, and I guess I'd be curious what the administrators maybe also want to hear, because we don't want to bring the public out and take in those comments without taking action. I think we've all agreed that we want to be very specific about what we discuss and ask. So I'd just like to continue discussing that.
Yeah, when you look at the themes from the parent survey, there are some items that are there. As I kind of expressed in the information I shared with you, some things would be, I could see being very prone to discrete incidents of individual experiences, and I think, and you correct me, because this is about the board's strong desire to be accessible and transparent with our community and to be responsive to our community, which I have tremendous respect for. In terms of more general themes about parent engagement, those things may be ways to structure a town hall meeting. You know, the nature of a couple of things that are upcoming. We have a process that is underway April 17th specific to facilities as a topic. We have strategic planning in May, which will get us to, again, what are the priorities in general of the community. So what I would be looking for, I guess, from this board, as you've talked about a desire to have a town hall meeting, again, in that effort to be accessible to the community, is my question is, what different things are we hoping for in a town hall meeting than we may be experiencing through facility long-range planning and the strategic planning engagement kinds of activities? I think one of the differences, the board really sitting as a group and being responsive to items is different than the structure of those. So, you know, certainly some of the ideas I threw out there were about community and parent engagement, you know, some specific information and response to questions regarding fiscal management of the district and the trends that we've seen, and answer questions if people do have those items that they might want more information or clarification on from the board in terms of that aspect of our operation. So broader themes may be helpful.
Do you have examples of that though, or what are you thinking when you say broader themes?
Well, that's what I was saying, fiscal management, parent engagement, as broader themes we could structure a town hall around. You know, you know, for example, there was information in the survey about bullying. The overall data showed that there's improvement there. But there are certainly comments about people being concerned about bullying, which is not surprising. You're generally going to get concerns about behavior and bullying. My concern with a topic like that, not that we should avoid that in a town hall, is engagement about my child's specific experience in kind of a public meeting with the board, of which you're not gonna have the context or ability to respond to that. Now, if it's in general, what are we doing about bullying? Certainly that's, I think, a different kind of conversation. So looking for, I guess, maybe some direction from this group as to what you want to accomplish with the town hall.
You know, as we look to improve our tech wing, could this be an opportunity to get some feedback from parents about areas they'd like to see improved? Or trades that they can see need to have more emphasis put on them? I mean, could that possibly be something, but yet it would be less volatile?
Yeah, so programs, offerings, what are things that parents would like to see?
Will that not be covered in the facilities long-range community forum?
It may be addressed in that, it may be addressed in strategic planning with those things in terms of the kinds of things our parents or community members want to see.
So, and then just to note too, that, starting last year, whichever curriculums are in phase one, parents have questions on the parent survey about those curriculums as well. So next year, our CTE, so our tech ed, business, family and consumer science will be asked in the parent survey. So we will also be able to get information that way about what it is that, how are they feeling things are currently going and what is it that they would like to see. We just got, in this past one, we did world language, art, and Phy-Ed and health. And so we did science last year. So, you know, that is a new process starting last year as well, to be able to garner parent information that way as well, so.
Right, and can you talk a little bit more about that? So that was something that was brought forward to be able to try to get input from a group of parents via a curriculum topic specific, right?
Yeah, so that was right in our efforts in the last, you know, year and a half or so, 2 years, to improve transparency and to be able to get information from from as many stakeholders as possible. So it's generally the same questions that we ask. We just changed the content area and we obviously edited it to make sure that it makes sense for that particular content area. But you know, I'm just trying to look real quick here. It's basically asks, you know, does the curriculum, like, do parents understand what is being taught, and is their child able to articulate the knowledge, skills, and activities they're learning in class if asked? Based on your observations, does the curriculum develop your child's skills? We get specific to which skills they would be able to articulate based on that content area. Based on your observations, the resources my child uses in class are appropriate for their age. And then there's an opportunity for them to comment as well for any programs or things that they would like to see differently, or any other comments they want to make, so.
And that's kind of where I was thinking when Mike talked about the broader concepts. Because I'm thinking back over the last couple of years in terms of when people came forward, we had the auditorium filled with parents coming in and talking about a lot of different topics. But in what triggered the broadcasting of our board meetings really was a lot about transparency and opening things up. We also had then a lot of discussion about curriculum and curriculum content. So in my head, what I'm trying to think about is, do we want to take the opportunity to provide opportunities for parents and community members to come in and tell us, you know, are we being transparent enough? Are there things that we should be doing to even enhance our transparency on topics like our curriculum and involving people in the development or the input into the curriculum that's out there? So, I mean, are those topics, if we take it at transparency and then curriculum, and then potentially even in that same context or same vein, would be the accountability relative to our academic standards and performance? I mean, how do we make sure that we're really doing all of the things, just like we described tonight, in terms of helping kids to understand the importance of the ACT results and vocabulary and all of those things. I mean, can we take a broader, higher level topics like transparency, like curriculum and parent involvement and engagement relative to the content of that curriculum, if you will?
Yeah, I mean, we started doing that parent survey, so if we did see any, concerns rise, that there was a particular curricular area where, that parents had concerns, or, we'd be able to respond to that and dig deeper, perhaps do follow-up focus learning sessions, things like that. Thus far, the 4 that we've done, have had very high ratings from our parents, in each of the schools. It breaks it down by school as well, so, I like it being a part of the curriculum cycle in that sense, because then we can get it, get to it when we're already in that process of looking at what is the research saying right now as well, so.
And maybe the little bit of a play on it though is, so they're hearing from you on that, but, is this really about us as board members having that same kind of transparency and the same accountability? Because again, you represent the administration of the schools, but what's our accountability? What's our transparency back to the community and parents that are out there, so.
If I could just throw this out, I feel like we're trying really hard to come up with topics for a town hall. And instead of forcing it, I mean, I remember strategic planning last year. It was my first time attending. I felt like parents and community members that came out, they all had a voice. There was a lot of feedback. And also, when we used the experience with the colored dots, everyone had a voice because your opinions on things mattered and they ended up on the wall. Instead of us trying so hard to come up with a topic, maybe we go through strategic planning and see if there are things that stick out, and maybe something from that can be utilized to bring a town hall after that.
Yeah, and things, because lots of things, right, bubble up in that process.
Right.
And you get, the thing that's nice about strategic planning is it's a broader scope than parents. Parents are important. The survey is specific to parent feedback. But you get some students, you get more community members, and you get staff that are actively engaged in that as well. And again, you're also gonna have the facility master planning piece, as well as additional information, which is added in this year.
Is that the plan?
So yeah, it's like, Reed, where do you want to go with this then in terms of, because it almost now it seems like we're kind of like trying to force something and we've only got a few months of school left essentially. So whether or not we're ready for it, but if we can tie it in with a strategic planning session and really kind of pull things out of that, and or do some things with the curriculum follow-up stuff or whatever.
And if there's a suggestion, if you recall the process from last year, strategic planning, is there, the way that that structure typically exists, right, is the board is in the process. You're not kind of up front and responding to stuff in the process. If there's some kind of change that you want to see there, I'm certainly, we certainly can consider those things. Or what I'm hearing from Bren is let's see what the process produces, and then, because you can do a town hall whenever you want. You can do one in summer, you can do one in fall, you can do it. It's starting to get tight up to that April meeting anyway with the facilities, so trying to get another event. And what happens, and this was kind of our concern, when we were basically doing a full multi-step, multi-event strategic planning every year, as you started getting, the participation was waning. It was, you're trying to pull people out frequently and then less were showing up, where in these 2 in-between years, we're trying to have one night. Now this year we've added a second, but it's gonna be more targeted to facilities, and I think that'll have its own draw to that. So that is a concern. If you start scheduling all these meetings, I think trying to get substantial turnout may be a challenge.
And Larry, I don't want it to seem that I'm giving up on town hall. I'm not, because like you, I think it is, transparency is important. It matters to parents in the community. But I'm saying, instead of us trying to force a topic that may not have people actually show up for it, utilize our time better and really think of people that you can invite to strategic planning. Maybe some new faces that weren't there last year. Invite some new parents this year to get some new feedback. And then out of those results from the feedback, maybe something will come from that we say, here we go. This is something solid we can use to do a town hall and really get some really great discussion.
But to your point, if there nothing bubbles up, you don't have to have one.
Right.
Has anyone received feedback from the community about this? Has anyone, no? So there hasn't been a demand for it, as far as we know.
Yeah, I haven't.
But I think, again,
Received
we
anything.
did respond. I mean, that
Yep.
was the whole thing.
Yeah, I'm not saying that we don't do it,
Yeah,
but I just want to make sure if there has been a demand, and we've been kind of we have been pushing it back for a variety of reasons. And if there has been a demand, I didn't want to ignore that. But if there hasn't been, then I'm okay with what we're discussing here.
Not beating down Mike's door or Danielle's door.
Nope.
Okay. Any other thoughts on it?
So I have a question about the parent comments
Mm-hmm.
from the survey, because I know it seems like it was kind of like maybe the more common things that were listed. I mean, are there other areas that were brought up of concern that maybe weren't represented by a lot of parents? Or is there, I mean, is that stuff that we're able to look at to see just what are the other parent comments? What are other concerns that are coming up within parents within the schools?
Yeah, and Jane had a similar question about viewing the comments, and those traditionally, what we've done is we've summarized and provided themes. Here's what are the consistent things. Comments the nature with comments and sharing those explicitly is, sometimes I talk about specific people, sometimes it gets a little personal. So historically, this board has stayed out of getting into the weeds of individual comments, and we've provided a synthesis of what what we're hearing. Again, the patterns were, you had the overall data, but which showed some improvement in bullying, but certainly there was double-digit comments about bullying. I'm sure there was probably more than 10 comments on bullying. I mean, I could certainly quantify how many on those themes for you. I talked to John Stangler today. It's a little chilly in here tonight. There was a lot of comments about cold classrooms, right? So that's something that came out. So what we do with, whether it's employee engagement, parent engagement, student engagement, is we get those, we have Candace do coding, and then we deploy those out to the leaders that it's germane to. So senior leaders, we see all of them. Brian Sniff will get the high school comments. Anthony Pizzo will get the middle school comments. Anything on facilities goes to John Stangler. He gets those as well. So then we do it. So at our administrative team meeting on this Thursday, we're actually doing some analysis and some discussion about what did we see from the parent survey. We did the same thing with the employee engagement survey. So that's what the administrative side is. Certainly, it's up to you as a group. If you want to see them, you certainly can. But I'm just trying to provide the history and the rationale as to why those things haven't been shared explicitly in the past.
Yeah, I was just kind of curious.
Yeah,
Well,
yeah.
I mean, we
It's a
looked
good
at-
question.
Last spring, we looked at some data in Qualtrics. Isn't this in Qualtrics?
It is.
So just providing us access to the raw data and allowing us to look at it and, I mean, I.
Sure,
think
the
that-
dashboard for the survey.
I think that we understand what some of those comments are and what they mean. So I just would like to look at the raw data and make my own assumptions from it.
Anything
So
else?
I just want to be clear, is that the direction of so when you say raw data, you want to see the comments?
Yeah, I mean, if it's in Qualtrics to give us permission to see that and look at it. I mean, I don't mind looking at the numbers either.
Yeah. So I'm just being clear, is that the direction from this group that you want me to have Candace share comments with you from the parent survey?
I don't have a feeling or desire either way. Like, I don't, that's what Jane wants to do, I'm okay with it.
I mean, if you give it to Jane, you should give it to everybody.
Yeah,
but
right.
No, I know, but I'm just saying.
I was just making sure it's
I-
clear
both
as to
ways.
what
I
I'm
feel
being asked to
strongly
do,
both
that's all.
ways, yeah. I don't know that I will
You what?
dive deep into it.
She feels strongly both ways.
Mhm. I support your request. Don't know that I personally need that, but
I mean, we looked at the comments from strategic planning.
Sure,
Like,
yeah.
all of those were outlined, and I guess I've just become accustomed to that.
Right.
So then I just figured that's what we would get this time as well. And
I just have a
Certainly, I'm
feeling
just-
These comments would be more personal
Yeah.
though, than what we see at strategic planning.
They can be. They can be, but again, I'm not resisting. I'm just making sure I know, I was just clear as to what you guys are asking for.
Well, don't have them spend the time doing that. I mean, I think we understand that that kind of is
the
confidential.
confidentiality,
Yeah.
right?
We don't need them to have to grind away at stuff.
Right?
I guess the only other comment I would make is that if there are comments from students that had any type of concern raised, safety concern for that student, we have already gone back and been able to support that student. So just in case you were to see something and be like, oh, hey, did you guys see this one? It's very concerning. Based on what it said, I just want to be clear that
Yeah.
we do take that. That was already an action step we took a couple weeks ago.
Thank you.
So to kind of follow up with what you were saying, so when comments are taken and then they're given to like the different administrative or schools, so what kind of action is then taken from those?
It depends on what, so if it's like Danielle's talking about, if there's a student, if we get student comments that might express self-harm or that there's maybe implying some abuse or something like that, then Candace has the ability to identify who that is. We can't see that. She's the one that can find that out. So in those are really the only cases I can think of in any of our surveys that we actually drill down to who, because the student survey actually does capture who it was. And so then that goes out to the student services team to do a follow-up with that individual or the parents, depending on what the nature is.
Otherwise, they're drawing themes, comparing it to other data sources that they might have, right? So if they see a lot around bullying, they're gonna look maybe back at their discipline data to see, is that matching? Like, do they agree with that, or do they disagree? If they disagree, you know, they might have a team of teachers, you know, a team kind of look into it, like, why do our students feel this way, but we don't see the data behind it. If they are in alignment, right, then we probably already have action steps, but it might be you know, an opportunity for us also to set different action steps if it feels like the steps we've already been taking this year aren't doing much by here in February to change that.
So is there there's a student and a parent survey? And
Yes.
is that just for like, is that middle school and high school or just high school?
Fourth grade and up, or I'm sorry, third grade and up. So, yeah, they get slightly different questions based on their age and stuff, so.
Yep. If there's anything else that comes up, just let me know.
All right. Good questions. All right, assuming we have no comments from citizens. All right, do I have a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn?
second.
All in favor of adjourning, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everybody.